Hello. Welcome to these candidate forums presented by the League of Women Voters of Tacoma-Pierce County through TV Tacoma. I am Liz Kernitz-Thurlow of the League of Women Voters, and we are happy to once again be working with TV Tacoma. The League of Women Voters of Tacoma-Pierce County wishes to acknowledge that we live on the ancestral lands of the Coast Salish peoples, surrounded by their traditional waters in the shadow of Mount Tahoma. We actively seek inclusive and respectful partnerships that honor Indigenous cultures, histories, identities, and current realities. The primary election is Tuesday, August 5th. All ballots in their signed envelopes must be in drop boxes or postmarked by 8 p.m. on August 5th. Our vote is our voice. Please use yours. In this year's primary election, we are asked to choose candidates for Tacoma Mayor, 3 Tacoma City Council seats, at-large position 6, and Council Districts 4 and 5, 1 Tacoma School Board position, a Pierce County Council member, District 5, Port Commission seats 1 and 4, and a new Pierce County Charter Review Commission. This is a big election. Don't forget to vote. If you are not yet a registered voter, you can register at the Pierce County Auditor's Office or at public libraries. Our forums are covering Port Positions 1 and 4, Tacoma Mayor, Tacoma Council at-large Position 6, and Tacoma Council Position 5. We are not doing a forum for Tacoma School Board or Council Position 4 due to the unavailability of the candidates. With me on most of the forums is Bailey Wambold, who will be asking many of the questions. Questions have been prepared by Bailey, me, and other members of the League of Women Voters of Tacoma-Pierce County. The primary election is on Tuesday, August 5th. You may mail your ballot or put it in a drop box. Please be sure to get it in a drop box or postmarked by 8 p.m. on that day. Please watch all of these forums and don't forget to vote. On behalf of the League of Women Voters of Tacoma-Pierce County and TV Tacoma, welcome to this forum for Tacoma Mayor. I'm Liz Kernitz-Thurlow, and I will be moderating. Tacoma has 5 geographic council districts, each of whom elects a council representative. We also have 3 at-large seats and a mayor, all of whom are chosen by all the voters of Tacoma. This year, we get to choose a mayor as well as some council seats. The primary election is Tuesday, August 5th. You should receive your ballot in mid-July and must place it in a drop box or get it postmarked by 8 p.m. on August 5th. If you're not yet registered, you may register at the auditor's office or libraries through Election Day. The candidates for mayor are, in ballot order, Steve Haverly, Jesus Jesse Carlos, Whitney Stevens, Anthony Tony Ginn, Anders Ibsen, and John Hines. Jesus Jesse Carlos and Steve Haverly are not with us today, unfortunately. The 2 candidates who received the greatest number of votes will move on to the general election. Thank you for being here, candidates. All of these candidates have agreed to our ground rules, which, among other things, say that they will not discuss each other in their answers. Do you agree? Yes, I agree. Thank you. Candidates have 2 minutes for opening statements, whatever I give them for questions, and 1 minute for closing statements. Our timekeeper is Terry Baker, and I think you can all see the countdown clock. In ballot order, Whitney Stevens will give the first opening statement. After that, the order will rotate. Whitney Stevens, your opening statement, please.
Thank you, Liz, very much. My name is Whitney Stevens, and I am running for mayor because I believe that every child in Tacoma deserves the same opportunities that my kids have. Peaceful streets where they can ride bikes, trees, safe crosswalks, and ability to get to school. These are fundamental principles that improve our lives regardless of the chaos going on at other levels. I've spent the last 20 years working in and around local government behind the scenes for many of our elected leaders, getting their priorities done. I know how to make things happen. Governing is about more than just positions. It's also about getting those positions across the finish line into results. My leadership style is about bringing folks together, not about burning bridges or about avoiding tough conversations. We are better together. My main priorities, if elected in the first year, will be police accountability and transparency to get our community safety back on track, and investing in our families through greater access to childcare. Childcare is not just a social service, it's an economic driver. Additionally, I will use my decades of experience to better manage the chaos happening at our federal level and how it trickles down to us here in Tacoma. We must continue to stand up for each other, to work together, and to be in community if we are going to get through the next few years of difficult chaos. My name is Whitney Stevens again, and I look forward to being your mayor.
Thank you. Tony Ginn, please.
I was born in Tacoma, actually at Madigan Hospital on a 7.1 earthquake. I have a legacy of service, public servants. I think we've kind of missed that point these days. And my mother built the entire library system at JBLM. My grandfather wrote the Lincoln High School alma mater, Dear Lincoln, in 1948. And so I'm living legacy in that. My focus first on Tacoma is we've lost that human contact. So how are you going to communicate if you don't have that human contact? Which then talks about developing a team within these great halls, which used to be the Medical Arts Building, and my Dennis Bernathy was here, and so was Dr. Ritchie, who did house calls. So I have a great deal of history and knowledge. I've worked with the legislature from the governor down. I was on a DNC committee, communication team. I have been on boards. And one thing about public safety I'm really concerned about, we need to be prepared for earthquake preparedness. Also in terms of local hiring of police, we need to use the TAP program with the commanding generals at JBLM, which is Transition Assistance Program. In terms of the homeless, we should partner, I would think, with Covenant House to get the kids off the street. We need more community gardens. And also, I think one of the main things is we have to understand that we're a team. We're all about Tacoma. I'm all about Tacoma. And I swear to God, I will be here in this building 7 a.m. until 7 p.m. Thank you very much. That is why I am a great candidate for the city of Tacoma's Destiny City Mayor. And get ready for the World Cup, June, July of next year.
Thank you. Anders Ibsen.
Thank you so much. My name is Anders Ibsen, and it's a privilege to run to be your next mayor. I'm a lifelong Tacoma resident, born and raised here, deeply in love with the city. And for me, this race really comes down to one question, which is, do we truly expand and invest in bold new opportunities for a city, or do we just have more of the same? It was a privilege serving as your city council member for District 1 from 2012 to 2019, working on issues like raising our minimum wage, expanding opportunities like paid sick and safe leave for our community. And as the only person who has not only served on the council, but also hired city chief executives, 2 city managers and the utility director, as well as the only private employer in the race, for me, whether it's the issues that we face like navigating the ongoing budget challenge, restoring safety in our neighborhoods, dealing responsibly with homelessness in our region, and also standing up to federal overreach, it really comes down to who can restore credibility and trust in the general public. This has been a very active campaign so far. It has been a real privilege speaking with over 11,000 Tacoma households, listening to the issues that you care about as well as your ideas. And that's the same kind of energy, follow through, and active listening that I'm going to bring as your next mayor. I sincerely appreciate your consideration. Look forward to continuing the conversation and your questions tonight. Thanks so much.
Thank you. John Hines, please.
Thank you. My name is John Hines. I am the current council member for District 1, which is the west end and the north end of the city of Tacoma. I was elected first in 2019, and I've continued to serve up until this point. I'm also the immediate past deputy mayor here in the city of Tacoma. I'm running for mayor because I think we're at a critical point in the city of Tacoma right now where decisions we're going to make in the next 4 years are going to set the tone for the next 4 decades here in our city. And I think it's important that we have a leader who can step in right from the beginning and be able to lead. We've done a lot of really good work in the last 5 years since I've been on the council, and I've been a leader on many of those issues, from housing and homelessness, to public safety and alternative response, to climate action and recycling, to economic development and job attraction. I've been leading at the forefront with my colleagues on many of these issues, and I'd like to continue to lead as the mayor on the city council. I've also been lucky enough to be a leader at the regional level, being on the Pierce Transit Board and on the executive board of the Association of Washington Cities, advocating for the needs of our residents at a regional and also national level is my role on the National League of Cities Finance Administration and Intergovernmental Relations Board. But more importantly, why I'm running is because I'm a lifelong Tacoma. I love this city. I've been here my whole life. I'm a proud South Ender, went to Stewart Elementary School, Stewart Middle School, and Lincoln High School, traveled all the way across 6th Avenue to the University of Puget Sound, and now represent the north end of the city of Tacoma on the city council. I love this city and all parts of the city, and I think we need a mayor who's going to step in and make sure that no neighborhood is left behind, to make sure every neighborhood gets what every neighborhood deserves and can have the ability to work with others to do that. And I think more importantly as a mayor, the mayor is the captain of the team on the council. And so we need a mayor who can work with their colleagues and pull things across the finish line, which is what I've been able to do in my time on the council. And I look forward to continuing to do that as the mayor. And look forward to your questions here this morning as we talk more about what I'm hoping to do if I'm the next mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we do move to questions. Whitney Stevens will also answer the first question first. I'm going to give you up to 2 minutes. What is the most pressing issue for Tacoma, or the top 2 if you can't decide on one, and how do you plan to address it? Go.
Thank you very much. So I view one of the absolute top most pressing issues in our city is our public safety and our police department. We've had a pattern of conduct over the past nearly 10 years that has cost the city millions of dollars. So in the last 4 years, we've paid out as a city over $40 million in police conduct lawsuits. Now, this is not just a gang up on police officers, because we need our public safety officers, but what it means is that we have a lack of trust within our community and our police department, and it makes it more difficult for our police officers to do the good work that they need to do and address hard community safety problems. This will be my #1 priority, not just from a safety perspective, but also from a budgetary perspective. We cannot afford to continue to pay out lawsuits for police conduct. This would be my main focus with bringing community together in order to create a shared plan for what community safety looks like. This involves our police department. This involves our officers on the front line and what they are seeing. It involves our community members affected by crime and violence. And hopefully we can all create a plan that we can work together. The other most pressing issues that I view also feed into this. These are issues like homelessness. We need a better and new solution to this because what we have been doing for the past few years is not working. We need to explore new solutions, things like social housing. The city is currently viewed as an adversary on homelessness and by many of our community partners. We need to repair this if we're going to make progress on this issue. Childcare is my last focus, and that has to do with our community safety as well. Our kids need to be cared for, and that makes our community more prosperous. It helps our parents, and it helps our safety.
Thank you. Tony Ginn.
I've talked with the commanding generals at JBLM in regard to national security and earthquake preparedness. We need to have an evacuation plan, and I talked to the University of Washington. There's about 2,000 seismic meters around, so you need to have fair warning and evacuation plans. Public safety is the second tier And so when we talk about our local police department, sheriff, coordination with the tribal law enforcement as well, the communication has to be quick and specific and targeted, because I'm going to be the mayor that is on the front line, and I want to get that first call, and if there's any loss of life, I want to be there. The second is homelessness. We have a lot of buildings that could be brought up to code. So downtown business people would not necessarily want to have those buildings, but there are buildings around town. As far as seniors, I think we got to pay more attention to them with these uncertain times with our federal government. Then we got to work on community mobilization for the midterms, because that is when the federal dollar is released by having our current president as a lame duck. Now we get down to the bottom line. I am going to take the I out and put we in, because that's what a team is all about. And if we don't have that coordination as public servants, I want to emphasize that again, that's what we are, that's what I am, that's what I'm vested in here in Tacoma, and I will be held accountable for everything I do.
Thank you. Anders Ibsen.
For me, the biggest issues that so many of my neighbors have been talking about at the door involves safety, perceptions of homelessness in our neighborhoods, and what we're going to do to respond to make sure people get the help they need, and building a brighter economic future that's more broadly shared. I had the privilege of speaking with a lot of people in the neighborhoods throughout the city. One of which was really memorable, it still sticks with me, was a lady I spoke to in the Lincoln district who told me that when she goes outside, she feels so unsafe to walk her dog. She drives her dog to the north end. Just utterly unacceptable. And of course, we've heard really tragic stories of recent shootings, youth violence, like has recently occurred at Lincoln High School, for example, in Salishan. And one is too many. And so how do we respond to these more effectively, besides making sure we're working with our new chief, making sure that we invest proactively in reducing recidivism and transformative justice and other youth diversion opportunities. So we've gotten a good start, but how can we work more to expand the role of community court, for example? How can we have better data sharing between the city, the prosecutor's office, the health department to get a better handle on data relating to violent crime and gun deaths, for example, how we can prevent needless violence like that? On the question of homelessness, the city's approach needs to be far more regionalized. And while there is an encouraging start in that respect, we need to, I think, take a much more critical look at how we're funding organizations to make sure that there isn't inefficiency and duplication, and so that people don't fall through the cracks. And so we're not simply responding to the need for immediate shelter, even though we have a significant shortage in funding that we need to work more proactively on with our regional partners. We also need to think longer term to provide greater opportunities for what the next step is in terms of where people are going to go after those services serve their purpose. So social housing, for example, greater utilization of our Home in Tacoma program so that people have a leg up. And then finally, with economic development, how we can better make use of our workforce development talent like the Port Maritime Center. Thank you.
Thank you. John Hines.
Liz, can you repeat the question real fast for me?
Sure. What is the most pressing issue for Tacoma, or the top two if you prefer, and how do you plan to address it?
No, thank you. I think we have to start real clearly with our city's budget, right? So as I'm on the council here in the next few months looking ahead, we're going to have a lot of tough conversations about our mid-modification of our budget, because revenues are down where we thought they should be. Sales tax is lower than we would expected. And we have calculated that about $75 million is at risk from the federal government in potential cuts coming to our budget. Now, to put that in context, $75 million is about 1/4 of our general fund budget. The police budget in a year is $118 million. So $75 million is a huge chunk. So everything else I think is downstream of that conversation is, how do we, because I would agree that public safety, housing and homelessness, economic development are all critical issues, but we have to really figure out how are we going to pay for those things and what are the choices we're going to have to make. And that's going to be an important community conversation, because we're going to need to talk about what is it the city has to do and what are the things that we need other partners to step up and do. So as the mayor, I am plan on leading some very important regional conversations around how do we fill the gaps and make sure our residents aren't denied the services they come to depend upon, because we are probably not going to be able to pay for those things as a city. We can get real creative, but it will be really hard to develop the money that we need for that. And so as mayor, I'm looking forward to some regional collaborations, not only regional with other cities, but also intergovernmental collaborations with our parks districts, our schools districts, our state of Washington, to really understand what can we do to really fill the gaps and what are the critical services our people need. Beyond that, I mean, public safety and making sure people feel safe in our communities is critically important, and it's something I've led on with our alternative response models and hiring police officers. Housing and homelessness is another one, and I was a big leader on Home at Tacoma. I want to continue to finish that work. And then economic development and attracting new businesses to the city, because that's one way we can generate more money for our general fund. Those are all things I want to work on, but those all are downstream from the important work of addressing the budget.
Thank you. You're all good at talking for 2 minutes. As you've all mentioned, homelessness continues to be a big issue. How will you help Tacoma build more housing, find housing solutions for homeless people, and get all people, students, elderly, mentally ill, and the just plain out of luck, the help, services, and protection they need? And once again, I'm giving you 2 minutes. Tony Ginn.
First of all, I'm concerned about the veterans. They are out in the woods somewhere, and we got to take care of them first. Not first, but all of them together. Once again, I mentioned bringing things up to code, but when I look at the youth, especially our future, we could partner with Covenant House, which is a nonprofit which concentrates on youth to get them off the street. We have a lot of issues with the rescue mission and everything else, because what happens is the homeless don't want to go by the rules. So they'll stay out on the street, do their drugs, do their whatever. That's got to be taken care of. But economic development has to be a revenue-producing element of the city. So I'm proposing an Office of Tourism, a film commission, and that film commission can be funded with the Washington Film Works Commission, where you can apply for $1 million. Then a creative arts district. So that's going to be creative. And we have a downtown here, so small businesses, we've got to work with them. As far as the federal dollars trickling down to the state, trickling down to us, I agree, there's got to be a regional coordination. Now I'm looking at Bruce Harrell in Seattle. Again, I want to mention the World Cup coming July 2026, because that will generate about $1 billion in sales tax revenue here in Tacoma. So when we talk about a $24 million deficit, I think maybe we won't have to lay off any people. Finally, it's my city. What can I say? I love my city. I'm going to take the hate out of it and keep the love in it.
Thank you. Anders Ibsen, please.
Well, given the recent news of not simply the federal budget cuts, but also just simply the state shortfall of just the amount of shelter beds, for example, where we need to immediately start is efficiencies within the current system. So, for example, and this also involves asking tough questions as well as employing the innovation of our partner organizations. So, for example, one of the biggest areas of scrutiny that I've heard from both people at the door as well as representatives from the nonprofit community and faith community is how we fund organizations, which are mostly contracted nonprofit organizations that receive competitive grant ranking. And one of the common concerns is, does that not create an incentive for not necessarily sharing real-time data, for being having a less than collaborative unitary approach to people who are falling through the cracks? So asking those tough questions and just demanding more of what we're already doing, I think, is where we need to start. In terms of regional conversations, let's also not forget about our partnership with the state. Western State is fortunately or unfortunately part of the solution in terms of the people who are absolutely most in need of services, who are at risk themselves or others. There needs to be some tough conversations with our partners at the state government about making sure that those services are well looked at and that there's accountability. And same thing with our nonprofit partners such as WellFound, and ensuring that wherever we engage those folks, that we're also employing as much successful jail diversion and ER diversion as well, so that we're not re-traumatizing people, we're not gumming up the system, and we're getting people the help that they actually need for sustainable progress. Now, when it comes to longer-term solutions, we need to better leverage Home in Tacoma, ensuring that there is faster permitting for our building community, that there are appropriate incentives, perhaps even financing options to make sure that not only can we see the development we need, but that's appropriately targeted towards affordability goals so that people can actually afford to stay in Tacoma as well as move here.
Thank you. John Hines.
Thank you. I think we need to talk about this as a continuum of housing and homelessness being a continuum where we start on one end, which is kind of the acute crisis of too many people that are currently unhoused on our streets. And there's an approach we need to take to address that in the shorter term, which is shelter and housing and services. And so on the council, we expanded using ARPA funds, hundreds of shelter beds to help people move off our streets into shelter and stability, and then on into kind of more permanent, stable situations for housing. We currently have got more money from the state of Washington to continue to operate some of those shelters, including the one right by my house in 6th and Orchard. So having models like that where we can help people move out off our streets and into shelter and housing, get the services and connections they need, and move forward is going to really help us address the acute issue of too many unhoused people on our streets. I think beyond that, we need to think about how we build more housing, because once people get sheltered, then where do we help them move from there into more permanent housing? So Home in Tacoma is a large piece of that. It's going to provide more housing options and more housing types, different scales and scopes of housing that people can move into. We also need to continue to subsidize housing with the Tacoma Housing Authority, Low-Income Housing Institute, a lot of our nonprofit housing providers, and think about how we get them the dollars they need to pull projects out of the ground. I was on the council when we passed the 1/10 of 1% sales tax for affordable housing and homelessness back in 2021, and that's generated over $6 million a year to help support affordable and permanently affordable housing here in our city. And I'd like to explore other options and think about how we could afford and pay for that. You know, I was on the YWCA board when we built the 54-unit affordable housing for survivors of domestic violence. And one of the things I learned in that process is we don't have a housing levy here in Pierce County like they do in King County, like they do in the city of Seattle. So we are competing with many fewer dollars to help bring those projects out of the ground than other communities are. And so we need to really think critically about how we can generate more funds to pay for the housing we need, because as we transition people out of shelter, we need to have a place for them to go. And there's many parts to that.
Thank you. Whitney Stevens.
Can you restate the question really quick?
Certainly. Homelessness continues to be a huge issue. How will you help Tacoma build more housing, find housing solutions for homeless people, get all people, students, elderly, mentally ill, the just plain out of luck, the help, services, and protection they need?
Thank you very much. So bringing this to center on what our homelessness situation looks like right now, I want to bring a few facts and numbers just to the forefront of this conversation. Currently, about 80% of the emergency shelter beds in Pierce County exist in the city of Tacoma. Those that exist outside of the city of Tacoma are generally for specific populations, such as domestic violence, veterans, et cetera. So if you become homeless anywhere in the county, you generally end up here in Tacoma because it's the only place where you have an opportunity to receive services, which is part of why the issue of homelessness feels outsized to our city. We need to address this. County Executive Mello has started a regional approach to homelessness. We need to move this work forward and ensure that all jurisdictions are contributing to carrying this load. The other thing I want to bring to the forefront is the reality of living on our streets here in Tacoma. Currently, it's estimated that our homeless population has a 30% death rate. 30% of folks living on our streets die within a year. That is worse than pretty much anywhere in the world except for like Gaza. We have a genocide here in our streets of Tacoma. And how do I know this is because I have spent months working with and learning from our nonprofit partners, our community folks working on the streets, trying to get people help. And what they have told me is that the way the city is currently operating their programs in order to help the homeless is actually creating more conflict, more harm, and they are viewing the city as an adversary rather than a partner. That has to change. We cannot be in conflict with each other if we are going to solve this problem. So what do I bring to the table is fresh approach, fresh ideas, a reset in bringing this issue to the forefront, grounded in facts, grounded in humanity, and working to actually help our folks.
Thank you. Thank you all. Anders Ibsen will answer this one first. Do you have a plan to resolve the city budget deficit? What services will you cut? What taxes or fees do you expect to see increase? And try to do it in 90 seconds, please.
Sure. So the budget actually has 5 levers. We only talk about 2 of them. So there's no way around re-engaging folks on the revenue question. We have 2 recently failed levies pertaining to core services that people otherwise do value, namely fire services and infrastructure. People who traditionally support those were very skeptical, and I think that warrants very crucial as well as timely conversation to make sure we can at least revisit those or similar conversations, because there's no way around funding those core services. When it comes to cuts, we have to make sure that we're being as strategic as possible, not to cut off our faces, not to cut off our nose to spite our faces, and not robbing Peter to pay Paul. We have to be mindful of the sustainability of one-time funding sources, which past councils as well as past legislatures have taken into account, budgeting off of one-time COVID relief, for example, so having an eye towards sustainability. And then we also need to be creative about other factors. So, for example, are we leveraging our debt as effectively as possible to save money on debt service that can go back to core services? Are we investing longer term in productive economic development based on the assets that we actually have to build a greater tax base? And are we making better use of opportunities for non-traditional revenue sources? For example, Tacoma Public Utilities renting out space to a local startup coffee store, for example. Are there other opportunities for the city to act more like a business to not only create more entrepreneurial activity for our economy, but also to balance the budget and preserve more core services? It's going to take an all-of-the-above approach.
Thank you. John Hines.
Yes. When we think about the city budget, or at least the general fund budget, there's 4 buckets, right? Property taxes, utility taxes, sales taxes, and business and occupation taxes. So if we think about how we're going to fix our budget, we have to start there. I agree that we're more likely than not going to need to go back out to the voters and ask for a property tax levy, either for fire or for streets. And we need to do a better job of pitching to the public and make sure they understand the value of that and what the return on investment they're going to get. So that is something the next mayor is going to have to be talking about, and I will be talking about. I think the other part, when you think about the buckets, the one that we can really try to leverage the most is the business and occupations taxes and trying to attract more businesses to the city of Tacoma. If we can bring more businesses into downtown, into our neighborhood business districts, we can actually really generate more revenue into our budget. When you think about a city like Seattle or Bellevue, one of the reasons their budgets are more flush right now is they have a robust business sector that we don't have. We have lots of nonprofits here in our city. We have lots of government employers. We do not have the large private companies that pay those level of taxes that can fund our services, so we really need to work on that. I also just think being creative and thinking about how we can, better be more efficient. We've been talking, and I've been talking to the city manager about the fact that we really need to prioritize the fact that the public should not feel a change in services if at all possible, and really prioritizing the impacts, the services that touch people in their daily lives to protect them as much as we can and look for efficiencies in other places. And so one of my driving core values is to make sure the public sees the value in what we're doing and that we try to protect that as much as we can, and that's what I'll do as the mayor.
Thank you. Whitney Stevens.
Thank you for the question. As I alluded to earlier, one of the main reasons that my focus is on public safety and the transparency and accountability of our police department is because of a budgetary issue. We have paid out millions of dollars in lawsuits related to police conduct, and that should stop, because that is money that we cannot afford to lose. My other focus will be childcare, as that investment is one that shows up to a 7-time return on investment. It's not just a social service for families. Too often we view children and our future in our city as the realm of schools, and the reality is that accessible, affordable childcare generates jobs, keeps parents in the workforce, improves employers' abilities to recruit, retain, and promote from within their companies, and can potentially increase our GDP by up to 10%. So these are targeted focuses that we need to be working on. The other piece that I would like to really call out is Tacoma voters are very generous with their dollars, but we have failed 2 levies, as has been mentioned, and I really see that as a vote of no confidence from our taxpayers and from our residents, that they do not see the value of their tax dollars and how they are being spent in the city. As a certified public records officer and someone who has done community contact and relations, that will be a focus of mine to really make sure that the citizens know where their money is going.
Thank you. Tony Ginn.
We got more money going out than coming in, and that's at the state level, county, and city. So when we talk about, again, economic development, what are the generating factors? Well, it's revenue. When it comes to our local law enforcement, I think there's ways that we can work to fill the empty suits, as I say. Then with the homeless, again, I'm focusing on the youth. I was out there in Hosmer. They're all in cars, couch jumping, everything else. So if we partner with Covenant House, that's what they focus on. They want a GED, they get a GED, they go to AA at TCC, then they can get a bachelor's, then maybe as high as a master's degree. The other aspect of Tacomans is we have to make sure that we communicate with them. I've been all over this city. 99% don't even know who the mayor is. So that means that we are not out there, like I say, like boots on the ground. Also, this Constitution is something that we need to really read and go by. So my whole thing will be statutes of Constitution, rule of law, and yeah, we got to do it.
Thank you. Okay, this one to get 30 seconds or less, because I just want a yes or no and a one-sentence explanation. John Hines is first. Given that there will probably be cuts to some services because of the budget deficit, would you support raises for council members or the mayor? Yes or no, and a one-sentence explanation. John Hines.
No, but I would reiterate the fact that the Commission on Elected Official Salaries is the body that determines who our raises, and the council never asked for a raise. It's the Commission on Elected Official Salaries that's always been the one that's given us the raise.
Thank you. Whitney Stevens.
I would echo what John said, that raises are not generally, raises are not the first option.
Thank you. Tony Ginn.
My concern is, the salary one with the city manager. I don't know how the council passed that one for Polly. But no, I would not want a raise. I got plenty of money, I'm retired, 30-year corporate executive. So I don't have any kids, I don't have any pets, I'm totally single. And like I said, I'll be here every day, 7 until 7 p.m. to address the needs of our employees.
That's a lot of one sentence. Anders Ibsen.
No, I'd not accept it, although as others have stated, this is something the Salary Commission independently decides. I would be happy to engage with the Salary Commission to make the case, though.
Thank you. Okay, so Whitney Stevens is first again. Do you have a plan, and you're going to have 90 seconds. Do you have a plan to address hate speech and threats to the BIPOC, immigrant, and LGBTQ communities? This connects to housing, policing, jobs, and everyday life. What do you propose to help improve and equalize conditions for all?
Thank you for the question. I'm sorry. So leadership begins at the top. Accountability begins at the top. And one of the roles of the mayor, I hear too often that the mayor is just a figurehead. The mayor is not just a figurehead. The mayor is the leader, the spokesperson, and the face of our city. And leadership on issues such as hate speech come from that person. And we need to be loud, we need to be protective of our communities, and we need to ensure that everyone is treated equally and that hate has no home here in Tacoma. So one of the things that I have loved most about this city, I came here to attend UW Tacoma 20 years ago, and I fell in love with it. I've said since then that it's the biggest small town you'll ever live in. And having grown up in a small town, there are pros and cons to that. So, my values and my goal as mayor would be to be present, to be vocal, to be front and center in declaring that hate has no home and that we are protecting our fellow community members from any of those discriminatory practices.
Thank you. Tony Ginn.
I grew up in the 60s and civil rights era. And here in this city, I mean, I'm walking around, you know, you got hate speech over here, you got swastikas over here, you got people, I just say, walk in my shoes. You know, I ignored all of that, and there's no room for us to be divided because of all the rhetoric, the division, pitting people against each other. We are all one human race, and we have to look at ourselves that way as Americans, then the ethnicity. But, you know, I've talked to the Jewish community, I've talked to the Asian community, and I've talked with many others, the Slavic community, and they're concerned too. You know, hate speech really does not have any color to it. It's hate, period. No love in it. And what else can I say? If you have any faith in people, then you're able to say, hey, let's bridge the gap. We all have one common goal, and that is to make sure that our city is safe, that we love each other, put that first, and then I think we can solve a lot of problems in communication and get rid of all the race and hate speech and everything else.
Thank you. Anders Ibsen.
So it's not simply about standing up to hate speech and playing defense. It's more about modeling the behavior and the actions and the speech that you want to see. And there's no greater person to do that than the leader of the city, like the mayor. As a past council member, I was proud to have voted in support of our equity and empowerment plan. I worked with making sure that that was actually baked into the city employee compensation plan as well. It's something that I would continue to do to ensure that we're not only hiring and making sure that we're expanding opportunities for city employees, city contracting, but ensuring that we're focusing on the retention and growth of professionals, both within the organization and our outside partner organizations too. Besides my formal role, what I also commit is continuing to show up as a private citizen to organizations who just need to see allyship in practice. So over the past few years, I've consistently been a supporter of Tacoma Pride, for example, or the Big Hat Brunch, for instance. I've shown up to Trans Day of Remembrance, for example, and just people seeing that someone in a position of authority actually sees them and is willing to use their privilege to not just speak out, but actually visibly, tangibly make differences and improvements, especially just in the light of the current federal hostility. We can't back down in the face of it. Quite the contrary, we need to double down on defending the people we care about.
Thank you. John Hines.
Liz, can you just repeat it since I'm the last guy on the line?
Do you have a plan to address hate speech and threats to the BIPOC, immigrant, and LGBTQ communities? This connects to housing, policing, jobs, and everyday life. What do you propose to help improve and equalize conditions for all?
I think there's 3 steps process of that. So first of all, just to give a little background, my day job is I work for the Department of Academic Equity and Access for the school district here in the city, and I've dedicated my life to educational inequities and trying to make sure that every student has access to the education that they are entitled to and deserve. And that is something that's infused my work here in the city of Tacoma. I was proud to vote with my colleagues on Resolution 40866, which is our anti-racist transformation resolution committing our city to be a leader in that work. I also was proud that I voted to support adding that work to our city manager's evaluation and add it into the code with Councilmember Blocker. And so I think for us, we are really trying to lead by example here in the city and drive that work forward. And as the mayor, I will continue to do that work because I've dedicated my life to it. I think more broadly than that, as has been said, the mayor is really the person who can be out front for the city and really set the tone and set the expectation. I think our mayor currently does a wonderful job of making sure people feel welcome, feel comfortable, feel accepted, and really celebrating the diversity that makes our city strong. And I would continue to work on that because as someone who's lived in Tacoma my whole life, what I have always loved about this city is the fact that as you go across it, there are many different people who have chosen Tacoma, and we want to do all we can to make sure, because they've made that choice, they feel safe, protected, and welcome. And I'll continue to carry that work on as the mayor of the city of Tacoma.
Thank you. Okay. Time for the climate crisis. And Tony Ginn will answer first. How can and should Tacoma help combat climate change? What will you do and how? and you may include how we should be working with the Port of Tacoma, or public transportation, or solar power, or whatever you can get into 90 seconds. Go.
Well, first of all, I just want to say we're on native land. And so the Puyallup tribe is a very instrumental part. It's the 8th largest in the nation and the only tribe in a city. And of course, they're working with the state. And the main thing is the salmon. You know, the salmon's reduced by 50% as a result of the hydroelectric dam on Snake River, Upper Columbia River, pollution in the water's heating up. And it's their staple diet for their diabetic condition. So climate change, if we study it, I mean, we got to have it addressed by 2035 at least, with no later than 2050. So we have to look at Mother Nature's unprecedented natural disasters, which is why I talk about earthquakes, which is why I talk about flooding that just happened down in Texas, which means the loss of life, property, and children. And so climate change is going to be a big issue. Then it's got to come from the city, through the mayor, working with the state legislature, federal government. And if we don't, I think we're our own worst enemy. So we've got to look at it in that respect. Wind, solar power, all of that's necessary, but Mother Nature, she's going to have her way.
Thank you. Anders Ibsen.
Cities are at the forefront, and that's the great news, is that there's so much that we can do in defense of our climate and just our ecosystem. So when I was on council, I was proud to have supported and led the charge on incentives for electric cars for Tacoma homeowners and residents in our community. I also pushed successfully for the banning of the expansion of fossil fuels in our Port Tide Flats area to pave the way for cleaner industries of the future. And if elected, I would only want to continue to work more on environmental issues, some of which would involve strengthening protections to make sure that we can grow our tree canopy and not be currently frankly, the city with the worst tree canopy per capita in our region, working with our utilities. We have immensely dedicated to sustainability leadership at TPU and how we can better leverage our integrated resource plan at both Tacoma Power and Tacoma Water in such a way to take advantage of our status as a hydrogen center, for example, at the Port Tide Flats, and other innovations like that. Moreover, I want to really dispel the false dichotomy that we've had in our political thought for some time, that there's a conflict between economic development and environmental protection. We can and should aspire for a blue-green alliance, if you will, where we can invest in the green-collar opportunities of the future for highly paid, opportune jobs for middle-class success. And that's why I'm proud to be endorsed both by labor as well as the environmental movement like the Washington Conservation Action. And finally, let's not forget our land use powers to encourage greater transit-oriented development and other alternatives so that people have more than single occupancy vehicles as a meaningful mode of transportation.
Thank you. John Hines.
Well, this is opportune timing because last night I voted with Councilmember Walker, Councilmember Diaz, Councilmember Dolly to update our climate action plan that we adopted in 2021. And what we did was we refocused on the fact that climate change is happening and it's having a distinct impact on the residents' lives today. And to really refocus us on how are we mitigating the impacts of climate change on people's lives. So encouraging planting of trees and expanding our tree canopy, working with Tacoma Public Utilities to expand EV infrastructure, looking to promote more multimodal transportation options and supporting transit, which I'm proud to do as both a Pierce Transit Commissioner. And I would just say that Councilmember Walker and I recently updated our Transportation Benefit District for the first time ever to commit 15% of those funds to sidewalks, because we want people to get out of their cars and walk around. And so this is something I've been leading on for quite a while on the council I'm very proud of. I'd also say one of the things that was said earlier that I agree with, which is we don't have to make a choice between a green economy or a no economy. We have a green economic development plan that I was proud to help formulate. I actually went down and presented on at the National League of Cities conference this last year in Tampa, Florida, about what the city of Tacoma is doing to try not only to attract green industry, but green our industry, make them more climate responsive. And one of the issues that I was talking about was I recently led an update of our city's tax code to encourage greater recycling. We are the first city in the state to have a tax code that if you recycle more, you pay less taxes, and really using that to drive recycling, the green economy, economic development, and seeing that we don't have to make a choice.
Thank you. Whitney Stevens.
Well, for me, the climate crisis is personal. My kids are 5 and 7, and they ask every day at the dinner table, what did you do to make the city better, Mom? Why don't we have more trees? And what is going on with our city and our planet? So for me, accountability on this issue starts at the dinner table. I want to talk a little bit about, we talked about budget and the budget cuts, but one area where we will have funding coming in to combat the climate crisis is through the Climate Commitment Act. Our state passed that, and we do receive money every single year on that. So my focus will be on putting that money directly into shovel-ready projects, things like Pierce Transit's plan to green their buses. They have this plan already created, they have done the work, and we could fund green buses to get those buses into the electric vehicle economy. I call that out because transportation is the largest pollutant in the city of Tacoma. And that's one place where we can make a dramatic difference immediately. I also would be focusing on partnering with the tribe more specifically or more deeply, especially as we're starting to see the federal government walk back many of our governmental protections. I see the partnership with Puyallup Tribe and tribal government to be one of the only ways to continue to make progress in the light of federal regulations being rolled back. And lastly, encouraging low-cost investments such as trees make a dramatic difference.
Thank you. Anders Ibsen will be first. 60 seconds. Do you support the campaign to increase workers' protections and increase Tacoma's minimum wage to $20 an hour? Why or why not?
Sure, thank you. I'm broadly supportive of the intent. Back when I was on the city council in my second term, my first term, excuse me, I was in support of the $15 minimum wage campaign, which was broadly supported by the commission the then council at the time appointed. That being said, we also have to be mindful of the impacts. I'm the only private employer and business owner running for this position, and it's not lost to me that people are operating on thin margins. So if elected as mayor, my job is to make sure that we're not only ensuring that Tacoma working families have enough to pay their bills and that our local economy has sufficient demand to support our small businesses, but we're doing so in as methodical and as strategic way as possible to ensure that business owners have an opportunity to make sure they're acclimating to the new rules and that they're provided sufficient opportunity to make sure that it's not happening in a way that's detrimental to their long-term sustainability.
Thank you. John Hines.
Thank you. You know, when we think about what they're working on, which is fair or better wages, predictable schedules, and safe workplaces, I'm completely supportive of those ideas. And actually, the group came and talked to council members about these, and we offered to work with them to craft policy that could address some of the goals they were talking about. I would just say that the current initiative that's before us, that signatures have been collected on, that they're going for validation right now, I cannot support it as written. There's a lot of concerns that I have about potential impacts, not only on the business community at large, but actually how we're able to deliver the services people depend on in our city. And that if it passed, would actually have an impact on our ability to deliver critical services and further make worse our budget crisis we're facing in the city. And so I can't support the current initiative that is being collected, but I would welcome, and I have welcomed, the opportunity to talk further about the principles that are in the Workers' Bill of Rights: better wages, predictable schedules, and safe workplaces.
Thank you. Whitney Stevens.
Well, I spent much of my early life working in industries that are directly related to this Worker Bill of Rights. I've been a barista, I've been a bartender, I've done childcare, and the low wage of minimum wage and the inconsistent hours of scheduling are things that I struggled with when I was not working in a salaried position. And I think we need to remember that our community members are struggling to pay their bills. I did sign the petition because I believe that this issue should be put before voters. I also have some concerns about the content of the petition. I don't know if it will stand up. There are questions about it addressing more than one issue, but the content of it and the goals behind it are things that we need to be focusing on and that we should be allowing the voters to voice their opinions on. It's not enough to pay lip service to this. We must make progress, and we must have a more strong push from us as city government in order to ensure that our folks can actually afford rent, afford food, and afford childcare.
Thank you. Tony Ginn.
Well, of course, I haven't been on the council and all that, but I have an S corporation. I can issue securities. I have an LLC for my entertainment division, Bullseye Entertainment, a nonprofit, my South Sound Actors Workshop. And when we look at all that, again, I keep saying communication, 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 but all of those are revenue-generating economic issues. Now, where do we get here? The COLA has not kept up with inflation. It's affected our seniors. It's affected the poor. And I agree. I mean, raising the minimum wage, I have no problem with that. $20 is great. But we haven't not adjusted for inflation. So that's got to be a factor. We've got to look into that. We got to make sure that we communicate to the city that that is our focus. We want everybody healthy. We want everybody to be prosperous. And we want everybody to be able to live greatly in our Destiny City.
Thank you. Okay, another 60-second one, even though it deserves more. And John Hines will answer it first. Currently, there's an initiative to enact a Workers' Bill of Rights in Tacoma. The petition has about 10,000 signatures and has been presented to the City Council for approval. If the council doesn't enact it, it will go to the voters. If the council enacts it, it's enacted. Do you think the council should enact it? Why or why not? John Hines.
Yes, I would say they're verifying signatures right now, and they should be verified by tomorrow from the county's assessor's office. So it hasn't been presented to the council just yet. But I think to answer my question to what I said earlier, which is, as currently written, I cannot support it. I think there are some real challenges and issues that are present in the current draft that the signatures have been collected on that would preclude me from being confident in putting it on the ballot. Though, if the signatures are there, the council has very limited choices what we can do, either adopt it or put it on the ballot. So we would need to do that. I would just posit one thing that's important when we say this is, if it is put before the voters and enacted, the current charter and state law says we cannot change it for 2 years. So if there are unintended consequences, if there are issues with it, the council will not be able to change anything for 2 years, which we saw with the Tenants' Bill of Rights, a similar opportunity. So I think we have to be very conscious of when we put things before the voters with that in mind.
Thank you. Whitney Stevens.
As I stated, I did sign the petition because I believe that voters should have a say in issues. This is something that I fundamentally believe in from my time in working in the auditor's office on elections. Our democracy is better when everyone has a voice at the table. Currently, our minimum wage is not sufficient in order to support anyone in living a basic standard, and we need to improve this. I think that the 2-year timeline is something that needs to be considered, as John mentioned. One of the unintended consequences that I have heard at the doors and from individuals about is that a lot of folks who had maybe one rental property, folks who had bought a starter home, kept it, bought their second home, are now out of the rental business because the Tenants' Bill of Rights essentially made it unaffordable for them to do that. And that is an unintended consequence that I think we didn't want from that. So I think that those are things that we need to always consider and potentially evaluate.
Thank you. Tony Ginn.
You know, it's interesting when I think about the Bill of Rights, I go back to the U.S. Constitution that our founding fathers did. And of course, you can get this, you can't see this because we're talking about it, but it's the U.S. Constitution. You can get it from Amazon for $1. As far as locally, with Bill of Rights and tenant rights, I am seeing all over the city that THA or Section 8s are wanting to go away. They're sending out 30-day bogus notices, scaring the seniors to death. Some of it causing even suicides. And yes, our tenants, I think the Prop 1 law, the state that's capped it, we have to look internally as to the conditions of the people that are living in those housing facilities. We can work closer with THA. We can work closer with HUD. And I believe we can address the problem. We may not solve it within 1 year. It may take 5, but we can do it.
Thank you. Anders Ibsen.
So whether or not the council decides to vote on it is entirely up to people voting their conscience, and I think elections are beautiful things on principle. But I think the deeper question to ask is, why are we even here in the first place? Why are people even bringing an initiative to the city? And I think the primary reason is just the failure to act, is the failure to even take on an issue of just below average wages and median income for our region. That's been the case for Tacoma for years and years. And whatever form that takes, whether it's taking a look at the minimum wage, whether it's workforce development, project labor agreements, greater opportunities for apprenticeship utilization. The city has had ample opportunity to work on these issues, and people brought this initiative not simply because they want a minimum wage increase for its own sake, but because of, frankly, the face of inaction. And it's that same theme of frustration and opportunity that has not been seized. That's a recurring theme, and that whatever happens with this particular election, we can definitely do a better job of, and I'll be committed to.
Thank you. Okay. What are your ideas about improving economic opportunities for young people in Tacoma? Let's do 1 minute. And I believe Whitney Stevens is first.
I think so. I think that to improve opportunities for young people in Tacoma, we need to also listen to what young people actually want. So we need to find alternate pathways that folks, not everybody is going to go to college. Not everybody wants to go to college. For those that do, we need to ensure that that education is accessible and affordable. But for those that don't, we need to have other skills and other training opportunities, things like the Maritime Skills Center, which is in progress and being built. We, as Anders mentioned in the last question, need to improve our apprenticeship utilization. I think there's an incredible role for the city to play in helping connect our local technical colleges with our local employers. I know from many of our employers that they need folks, they need a pipeline of workers in specific skills, and they don't have the capacity to set up an apprenticeship program on their own. So we should be making those connections. But ultimately what it comes down to is elevating the work of those for whom this is affected. We as grown-ups shouldn't be telling people what to do. We should be supporting youth to find a good path and making sure that those opportunities exist.
Thank you. Tony Ginn.
Education, education, education. Internships, internships, internships. Public-private sector partnerships. We got to get the youth off the phones, too. I mean, how are you going to get a job on a phone? You know. Last but not least, I think young people want to work. There's plenty of jobs out there. Our parents could lead as a good example, but today's Gen Z generation is not looking at it the same way we did by holding one job for our life. They know they're going to have 6, 8, 10 different jobs. So we've got to make sure that they understand how to manage money, too, in order to be able to sustain themselves and to be have the resumes so that an employer will say, oh, yeah, this is the right person for this particular position, whether it's a medical or technical, CDL drivers or whatever it might be.
Thank you. Okay, Anders Ibsen, please.
So the first step is stability. I mean, there's an old saying that it's a full-time job to be poor. I mean, if you're in a lower opportunity situation, just navigating the complex bureaucracy, trying to advocate for yourself, if it's an English as a second language situation, advocating for the adults in your family, that leaves far less room for accessing opportunity, let alone knowing what's out there. So making sure we're breaking down those barriers, ensuring that there's a much clearer, whether it's some kind of ombudsman position or much clearer pathway to make services and opportunities available to kids from more marginalized situations. The Port Maritime Center and other opportunities are fantastic. We also need to make sure that we're investing in an actual economic development plan that creates the jobs that those skilled trades types of positions can go to. And in working with regional bodies like the Economic Development Board and others to make sure that we're leveraging the existence of the skilled trade pipeline so that we're not only an attractive hub for the attraction of businesses, but the growth of folks who are already here.
Thank you. John Hines.
There's a lot to this that I want to talk about. I'll pick one specific thing. So I was a high school teacher for a long time, and one thing you find about when you work with high schoolers is they tend to gravitate towards what they know. If they know about a job or they know it exists or their parents had a job or a friend, they gravitate that direction. So one of the biggest things for helping youth get into better jobs is giving them an idea of what the jobs are. So I like to use an example of Jobs 253. The city has many wonderful jobs, both white-collar jobs, blue-collar jobs, represented, non-represented trades, all sorts of them. And I'd really like to more clearly connect with our school district to make sure those kids know what opportunities are available to them and give them opportunities to gain skills, see what the career paths are, and move forward into them. We've been pushing really hard to diversify our workforce in the city, and I'd really like to see us continue that work by diversifying it through working with our young people in the community. I think beyond that, we need to carry that further and use our other partners, the Park District, the county, the state, the school district, to make sure students see more of the jobs that are out there so they can move into them.
Thank you. This will be the last question. Tony Ginn will answer it first. You have up to 90 seconds. There is much community dissatisfaction with the Tacoma Police Department despite increases in spending. What are your plans or suggestions for improving community relations or changes to the police department? Tony Ginn.
Get the cops out of the cars, walk the neighborhood. When I grew up here in the Hilltop, we had a motorcycle policeman, Vic Martino. He would go around, he knew everybody in the neighborhood, and if you got in trouble, he called your mother. That's worse than Raymond Hall, you know? So, I mean, they take an oath, just like we do, and they're human. They're gonna make mistakes. We gotta accept that. But at the same time, the mayor has to have oversight, which is why I've talked to the chief, I've talked to deputy operations, I've talked to detectives, and the one thing I say, we got 4 sectors here. So let's make sure that we cordon off I-5 when there's a shooting in Lakewood so that they can't escape. That is very important for public safety. The other is, let's do a gun buyback program with a cashier's check, which creates a money trail. And therefore, and then reinstate Crime Stoppers, you know, so that there's a $1,000 reward, click, you've got your $1,000. We have facial recognition. We have, and we need to look at other cities and what they're doing in terms of their technology and hopefully incorporate it here. The other aspect of it is, you know, you got a cashier's check. Somebody turns in a gun with a murder, they're going to give it to some third party. They're going to go over to Payday Loans or whatever to do it. Well, hello. Welcome to Walla Walla. There's your ticket.
Anders Ibsen.
It all comes down to people's immediate experiences and what they're visibly seeing or not seeing. And in all my conversations in the community, that takes the form of a lot of things, but response time is one of them, just making sure that there's prompt responsiveness. And so among other things, that means working with interim chief, potentially full-time chief, depending on the decision of the council, Patty Jackson, and ensuring that as we're moving to fully staffing the police department with the upcoming, I think it's 20 or 22 lateral hires, that we're not only putting those qualified officers to use, but that we're best supporting them through everything from community policing efforts, so making sure that we're doubling down on the things that we know work historically in Tacoma, like Safe Streets, the Hilltop Action Coalition, and others, and ensuring that we're not simply asking of the city, but kind of in a Kennedy fashion, asking what the community can do to support safety as well. I am supportive of the direction that the city has taken law enforcement in terms of a greater reliance on mental health co-responders, community service officers, officers and others, but there's certainly gaps and efficiencies that we can solve in those. One avenue I think that I'd really like to explore is dispatching. I'm a very big fan of the Eugene Cahoots model, where as opposed to first responders sending in the cavalry first and then mental health staff later, why not start with the lowest impact service first and then calling people if there's a greater need. And besides being trust building, it's also significantly less resource intensive in a time of constraints on our budget. So those are just a few examples, but it just comes down to results and making sure people see what they're getting.
Thank you. John Hines?
Thank you. I think one thing I've heard as I've walked around the city and talked to folks at their doorsteps or in the neighborhood has been that everyone wants to feel safe. It's a universal principle no matter what neighborhood you're in. But the question comes back to is, what do people need to feel safe is a question we really have to put our fingers on and deal with. In some instances, it's more police presence and it's better response times. In some instances, it's street lights, fixed sidewalks, graffiti quickly removed. In some instances, it's having community groups and credible messengers out there in the community working with them. I think as the mayor, one thing I'd like to do is we had Project Peace. This predates my time on the council, but really having a real focus of getting out in community and asking that question. What is it going to take to make you feel safe, and then executing upon it? And I think we can leverage our experience with our alternative response models, with the goal being that the right person shows up at the right time with the right tools to help you. I think we can look at, as we've said, safe streets and other community groups that can activate people. But I think what it really comes down to is sometimes we've had police officers respond in situations where they were not what was needed, and that has caused a disconnect with the community. And what I would really like to do is put our officers in a place to be successful by working with community to understand what is it they need at the time to feel safe. And I think if we use that as the guiding principle, and I use that as my guiding principle as the mayor, that everyone wants to feel safe, and we're going to figure out what that looks like, I think we'll be able to repair the relationship between the community and our police department and our city in general.
Thank you. Whitney Stevens.
So I think it's really important to realize that we are not the only community struggling with this and struggling with this in the recent times. And there are communities who have done this and done this successfully. Baltimore has seen a dramatic reduction in their violent crime rates in literally 6 months through strategic efforts. Those include transparency, greater connection between our violence-affected communities and our police officers, as has been said, listening to what the community needs, but also listening to what our officers need. Our officers, whether they are the ones on the ground responding to incidences, and it's important to make sure that they are partners in these efforts. Also, one of the fundamental things that I have seen in these other communities is accountability starts at the top. It means that the mayor, the city manager, whatever form of government, those leaders, the police chief, are talking about this every single day. It is a focus of every single day efforts when we show up that we are working on this issue, we are working with our community, and we are elevating those who are doing the great work. The last thing that I want to talk about is evidence-based solutions. So the City Council has made a couple of decisions over the last few years that go in the face of concrete evidence-based practices. We've spent money on a few technologies that have been shown in other communities not to work, and I would really like to see us focus on really working for evidence-based solutions.
Thank you. Thank you all. Now you may each have 1 minute, or up to 1 minute, for a closing statement. These will be in reverse ballot order, so we will begin with John Hines.
So as I said to start out, Tacoma's at a critical moment where the decisions that are going to be made the next 4 years are going to impact the next 4 decades here in our city. I've highlighted some of those: public safety, housing and homelessness, economic development, and more importantly, our budget process and how we're going to balance our budget to make sure the residents of our city get the services they depend upon. Because it's such a critical moment, we don't have time for someone to learn on the job or try to figure out what we've done or know where we are to understand where we're going. I'm the one person who's currently on the council who's supported by my colleagues, and I'm going to be able to step in on day one and lead on the issues that mean the most to the public. There will be no slowdown when I become the mayor, and I think it's important to recognize that we cannot take steps backwards. We've taken many great steps forward. We haven't arrived at where we need to be, but I am confident that my leadership will be able to take us to where we all hope the city should be. Thank you.
Thank you. Anders Ibsen.
Thank you so much. The central question of this election is, do we go big or do we just settle for more of the same? What this position really calls for at the end of the day is a proven track record, consistent values, but also creativity and the willingness to ask tough questions of both ourselves and our partners. Whether it's the issues of ensuring greater safety in our neighborhoods, an actual dynamic economy that builds a tax base for the services we need, responsibly handling homelessness at the regional level, and leading and providing innovative models. What the situation at this time really calls for is more than just continuing to double down on what we've been doing this whole time, but actually having the courage to try new and bolder things. Things that are backed by evidence, yes, but also entrepreneurial risk-taking as well. And that's something that people are hungry for. People want to know that the city actually stands for something, that there's someone in charge, that there's a clear plan of action, and that everything from just basic responsiveness to people's concerns and proactively engaging people so that they're involved on the front end of decision-making becomes the norm at City Hall and not the exception. I humbly ask for your vote. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Tony Ginn.
I am the people's mayor. And history-wise, in 1950, the population was approximately 142,000. Today, it's, I think, 223 or 232. So let's go fast forward to all the boards I sat on. Safe Streets in '89 when I was hired to be on the drug house limitation team as a result of the shootout with the Rangers on 25th and Grant. Tacoma Community House, which has multiple approaches to the community. I brought venture capital to Tacoma in 2000, so I can see the relationship between corporate, between the private small businesses, and the city's role in it. If we don't be people to people to people and get people with more faith in government, then we're going to have a lot more difficulty in establishing policy and advancing Tacoma, advancing our youth, and being able to say, hey, I love my city, come on out. We're glad to have you.
Thank you. Whitney Stevens.
Thank you, Liz. And thank you for some great questions. The fundamental question of this election is, do we want more of the same? I have never been elected, but I have spent 20 years working in these systems. I know how the system works. I know how to get things done. I bring a common sense, no nonsense, make it work approach to government. My entire career has been spent saying not, well, if we have this, then we can do our goals, but rather, how do we make it work? My career has been based on results. Moms get stuff done. And I will bring that no-nonsense, very down-to-earth, bringing practicality to our city government and responsiveness to this role. The other piece that I think is very important is we will have issues that we will have conflict on today, but we must remember that we can be partners tomorrow. Because together we can do anything, but if we are adversaries, we cannot do anything.
Thank you. Thanks to you four for being here and answering our questions. This forum and the others for all local offices, which will be on our ballot, may be viewed on TV Tacoma or on the League's website until primary election day. The candidates for mayor are, in reverse ballot order, John Hines, Anders Ibsen, Tony Ginn, Whitney Stevens, and those who were not here today, Jesus, Jesse Carlos, and Steve Haverly. The two who received the greatest number of votes will advance to the general election in November. Thank you for being here. Thank you for watching. And remember, the primary election is August 5th. Please don't forget to vote.
You're watching TV Tacoma.